Hello and welcome to West Virginia Author. I'm your host, Lynn Squires. My guest today is Laura Jackson, an environmental writer and humorist. Her work has been published in Terrain, Brevity, and Hippocampus, and she writes regularly for West Virginia Living Magazines and Wonderful West Virginia. She works at WVU as a research writer. Welcome, Laura.
Thanks for having me, Lynn.
Sure. Probably the big news in your writing world right now is you won a contest last year.
I did.
Tell us about that.
I did. Well, I had a finished manuscript, a collection of essays, and Autumn House Publishing in Pittsburgh was having a contest. They have one every year in multiple categories, and the winner gets a book deal. And so I entered at the last minute, and I thought it would probably be a waste of money, given the immense talent that is out there, especially in the Pittsburgh area. Lo and behold, I did win, and so my book will be coming out in October of 2024.
Nice. I think we have a cover of it. Mark will be putting that up on the screen so people can see it, which is an amazing cover. Anybody that knows you knows that was perfect.
It's a beautiful cover. They did a phenomenal job.
Well, I think I got to read some of it ahead of time, thankfully. It's your humor, which is perfection, blended with environmental concerns and animals. Mm-hmm. So being West Virginian, you talk about exploring both elements of West Virginia, the human element and the wild element. And you've done a masterful job of doing that. I think everything I read has humorous story, anecdotal kind of stuff, and then it zooms you right into like environmental or other issues masterfully. I mean, there's not a boring second in there. Dogs and possums, two of the animals. I've seen you post so many times about your West Virginia brown dog. I think he's the only dog I knew that had its own hashtag, maybe.
Yes, and an Instagram page.
Yes,
yep,
indeed.
That's Minnie.
Well, Minnie's pretty cool, but that was such a fascinating article, but it really directs people to the plight of shelter animals.
Absolutely. I mean, we have a spay and neuter problem in this country and in West Virginia too, just like anywhere else. So I always try to direct attention towards adopting as opposed to shopping, and there's an awful lot of wonderful little mutts out there that do need homes, West Virginia brown dogs in particular. They have a certain je ne sais quoi, I think.
The other animal of your heart, opossums, anybody that could see your picture on your website or the back of your book sees
Right.
you literally covered with possums. How did that love affair start?
Well, ironically, I feel like the world actually assigned the love of opossums to me. When I was in graduate school, I was writing my thesis, and gradually it sort of took on the form of various pieces about animals, and an opossum was one of them. And the original story was, it was a humorous piece about all the possum family that gathers around to say goodbye to their possum who has died. But of course, he's not really dead, so at every funeral he wakes up again. And I read this in public, and people laughed. And so I read it again, and people laughed. And eventually I sort of became associated with opossums, and people started sending me opossum stuffed animals in the mail and opossum T-shirts. And I had a biologist friend who was rehabilitating, had rescued 4 baby possums. So I took my son up to her house and had them crawl all over us. And they're wonderful creatures, and they're kind of misunderstood. But I think they're having a moment to shine, because all of a sudden people are discovering the opossum's cringy relatability.
When my son was little, his babysitter had a pet possum named Meathead. And I have a picture of him looking out our living room window, and she's holding him, and he was like spoiled Meathead, just huge. But he got to know him early on. One thing that kind of struck me reading your work was the amount of research that apparently went into a lot of this, because I can't imagine you hopped out of bed and just knew all this stuff off the top of your head. But I think in fiction writing there's research that you don't expect necessarily. Your book takes you places. But talk a little bit about your research and the techniques and whatnot, because it seems like there was a lot in your book.
There's,
You present it in such a great way, though. It's not
well,
like
thank you.
it's not like you're reading the encyclopedia.
Well, and I think that's the key to good writing is being able to weave your research into your narrative. I mean, the internet is right there at our fingertips, so I did most of my research there, but there's also a phenomenal amount of books at the library and tons of books about West Virginia. I looked into books, I read West Virginia geology books, biology books, history books, and then often I would contact the authors themselves. And you know, a good deal more of the information came from interviews I had done with academics, researchers for other work, and I was able to incorporate that. And so often, in a lot of cases, I had an idea for an essay, and when I would get stuck, that's when you turn to your research, you turn to the information out there, and you sort of do a deep dive, and that somehow miraculously leads you further on into the essay, and really, at least for me, it really helps me direct my focus.
The one story you did about caddy flies, I don't know.
Caddisflies.
Caddisflies.
Yes.
Fascinating. I don't think I had ever read that word before, so of course you send me to look it up and do my own little research there. But I think I've seen them maybe. They looked kind of
Sure.
familiar. But the way that you told the story of dealing with those, which I can't imagine having a career or a summer job draining poop off of a Tupperware container for bugs. That alone is probably worth buying the book just to read that whole story. But you blended that with discussing water pollution, strip mining, disasters like Buffalo Creek. I think I was probably maybe 14 or 15 when Buffalo Creek happened, and I remember hearing about it on the news, but I was an adult, like well into adulthood, before I really realized what had happened. But that's one of the largest industrial disasters in the country.
Yeah, and you know, it's a funny thing to have a job in which I looked after caddisfly larvae all summer, and at the same time, it's a really important environmental issue in West Virginia, mountaintop removal. And the caddisfly was sort of a natural bridge between them because the caddisflies live in these crystal clear streams. Ideally, that's where they thrive, and mountaintop removal, water pollution really threaten the caddisflies. And not everybody is a tree hugger, as I've been called. I wear it with pride. But Buffalo Creek is kind of the link between the two. You don't have to be necessarily a tree hugger or a hippy-dippy environmentalist to appreciate and mourn the terrible tragedy of Buffalo Creek, but it really ties the two together, I think.
I guess when I was younger, I thought it was just rain and a flood. I didn't realize that it was stuff from a mine that went hurtling down this
Yeah, it was a terrible
area.
thing.
I think one of the other things you mentioned was over 2,000 miles of headwater streams are buried someplace underneath the slough that comes out of having mountaintop removal. I guess I don't really think about that. Probably a lot of people don't realize that
Right.
it has to go somewhere. They don't just put it back.
Right, they just kind of they call it the overburden, and they shove it down into the valley or the hollow next to it. And those hollows are an awfully, West Virginia is one of the most ecologically diverse places on the planet. So this is not a practice that is sustainable if we want to continue to enjoy our beautiful state. And people live in these hollows. So it's something that really needs attention, I think.
Well, I don't think I realized till the past couple of years there were places in West Virginia where there was no clean water at all, the southern part especially, and I assume most of that has to do with mining and the offshoot of mining and so forth. But again, the way you blend that in with humorous anecdotes about taking care of larvae all summer. What was your thought about how you chose stories to put in this book? Did you set out to have X number of animal stories and X number of environmental tales?
No, I think like many writers anyway, I stumbled my way through the book, and it started as an essay here, as an essay there. And I wasn't even thinking about a book initially. I just wanted to write an essay about caddisflies, and I wanted to write an essay about teaching my children teaching me how to catch crawdad. And those stories inevitably have an environmental component. And that's what I write anyway, is environmental humor. There are not a lot of people that write environmental humor because it's sort of an odd combination. But so there's so many stories. I've lived in West Virginia almost all my life, and I have an incredible number of neat stories. So there was no shortage of narrative there. So they just kept coming out, and finally I smushed them together.
And a book came out.
A book came out.
Tell us a little bit about your writing process. Like, what's the perfect writing day for you?
I am a super early riser, not even by choice. My body just usually says about 4:45 in the morning, hey, get up. So that's what I do, and I write in the morning, and then I will, by then I'm usually kind of depleted, and so the way I sort of fill up my creative cup is to go running around in the woods, as you know. So I'll take myself and my West Virginia brown dog for a hike, and then come back, and sometimes in the late afternoon. Interestingly, the morning is when I do the heavy-duty research writing, and the afternoon is when I have sort of a humor spike, and so I do the humor in the afternoon. And then because I've gotten up at 4:45 in the morning, I fall asleep at 7:15.
You don't even make it through Jeopardy, gosh. I know a lot of writers have things they do or have around them when they're writing. Do you have to have coffee, M&Ms, anything like that?
If there are M&Ms, they will not last long, especially the peanut butter ones. No, I usually do like to have, if it's warm weather, I like to have an open window so that I can sort of tune into the sounds of, hopefully there's nature out there, and that will sort of keep me focused a little bit, but I don't have any specific rituals. It's really more about just the urge to write that comes over me. And when it does, I try to drop everything no matter what I'm doing, because you gotta hold on to it or you lose it. Sometimes I'll lose the thread and be irritated with myself for the rest of the day.
I know. Been there, done that. So you don't have the book out yet, but you're working with the press. So how does that work for people that also don't have a book out yet? What do you do with them?
Well, I have an incredibly delightful and patient and supportive editor. And so my past experience was graduate school, getting my MFA, and that was the case where they would say, all right, this needs work, and this needs work. And so I'd go back for a week and really, dig in and reshape and edit. And now my editor will approach me and he'll say, I made this change in this paragraph, what do you think? And oh my gosh, someone else is guiding me a little more specifically than I'm used to. So he'll suggest edits and he'll send them to me, and I almost always agree with them because he's a wonderful editor. So we just have a back and forth that way, and I'm very lucky that I'm working with Autumn House Press. They're a wonderful group.
So are there different types of editors, like you move on from him to who?
There'll be one more editor before the end, and she's sort of the final boss. And she's also a super lovely person and very talented. So the edits have actually been pretty minimal, and maybe that's what happens if you sit on a book for 6 years and obsess over it. There's not quite as many changes that need to be made.
You've written it and rewritten it and rewritten it again.
I'm so tired of my own writing.
Well, tell us about the cover. Did you design that, or did they design it and you just went, ah?
Actually, they said, what ideas do you have for the cover? And one of my favorite places in the whole wide world is Pendleton County, which is the highest mountains in West Virginia. And Spruce Knob and Dolly Sods are known for the sort of rocky outcroppings, and then the red spruce forest, which used to cover almost all of West Virginia and now was logged down to about 10% of the state. That's all that's left. And the trees up there are flagged, which means the wind blows so incredibly fast and harshly that the branches only grow on one side. And it's sort of iconic, and anyone who's been up there would recognize that. So I told the team that I wanted to sort of have this image of it looks like a sunset, but it's actually a sunrise. Looking into the sunrise and having the ridges in the background looking off to, Virginia and southern West Virginia. And then I have that affinity for possums, so I asked them to put a little opossum on the cover looking off into the horizon, and I think they did a phenomenal job. It's an absolutely beautiful cover.
It really is.
Yeah.
It's very, very stylized
It
and
is.
just really cool looking.
Very unique.
I think you brought something with you to read for us, maybe?
I
A little
did.
snippet.
I did. I just have a quick snippet here, and this is from the second or third essay in the book. It's called Being West Virginian, and it's about what it's like to be a West Virginian from the inside. The rest of the world truly doesn't know. Well, you're a West Virginian, so you know it's awfully hard to explain to the rest of the world what it's like to be a West Virginian. And I've tried to do that in the essays where I'm not talking about animals and mountains and caddisflies. So there are a few essays about the people as well. And in this part, I'm talking about how we all love to wear West Virginia themed gear. Go to the store and you're guaranteed to see someone wearing a cap with West Virginia University's Flying WV logo, or someone with a Monongahela National Forest sticker on their car. And when we're out of state, these shining beacons help us find other West Virginians in the world. We'll be drawn to each other, like magnetic north, outed by our ball caps and t-shirts. We'll stand in the Old Faithful parking lot in Yellowstone or on the beach in the Galapagos Islands and talk about home. Where are you from? Upshur County. Where are you from? Hampshire County. My brother's in Hampshire County. Is that right? My brother's in Wyoming County. I went to a church retreat in Wyoming County last spring. Really? My daughter's a preacher in Pocahontas County. Oh, I love Pocahontas County. The irony of meeting a familiar face far from home is that while we're so excited to be out of state and seeing something new, the sight of another West Virginian strikes the sweetest note. We've found someone in this wide world who understands what we're so unable to convey to residents of the other 49 states. We don't have to explain, yes, we're from West Virginia, and yes, we have all our teeth and running water, and no, we aren't coal miners, but yes, we know plenty, and yes, it is a beautiful state. We meet each other and grasp hands and find suddenly more joy in our bond than we did in the vacation we took to get away from the place that connects us. It's comforting to encounter our own because when we meet people from other places, there's a checklist of corrections we run through regarding our existence. And the primary topic is often geography. The conversations, vastly different than the ones we have with our Mountain State brethren, inevitably go like this. Where are you from? Arizona. You? West Virginia. West Virginia? Hey, I have a cousin in Richmond, James Leonard, sells insurance. You know him? It's always Richmond. I don't know what it is about Richmond, Virginia that is attracting your cousins, but it really must be something if they've all decided to settle there.
I love that. I've read that story already, and I laughed all the way through it, but it rings true, so many things that you talk about.
We have all been there. It's either a cousin in Richmond, and it truly is always Richmond, or Western Virginia. They repeat it back to you, oh, I love Western Virginia. And we just go, okay, here we go.
We also have other claims to fame as the state, though. We're the only one that's completely in Appalachia.
That's true.
But you made the good point that we touch every other segment of Appalachia.
We do. You can traverse all of Appalachia if you had a really long day and a couple of energy drinks.
And a good car for the curvy roads.
That's right. That's another West Virginia fun thing is the complete lack of straight roads.
You said at the beginning of that story, while West Virginia's outline is unforgettable, the land within its recognizable borders may be a mystery. That's so perfect because when you talk about meeting people elsewhere, when I was in Hong Kong, I ran into somebody from West Virginia. I mean, what are the odds there? The beach, obviously, you run into
Sure.
the Flying W and everything.
Costa Rica, I ran into someone from Charleston at breakfast.
But you don't, you do have to completely explain the mystery of what we are
You do.
to everybody. But I think you've covered that so well in this book. I think you're going to end up giving people things to say back when they encounter these situations. And your humor is just subtle and hysterical at the same time, if that's possible.
Thank you.
So talk to us about some of the other stories besides possums and dogs. What else do we have to look forward to?
Well, there is a story about me learning to drive a pop-up camper, and I had to take it down what's been called the most dangerous stretch of road in West Virginia, which is 33 East going into Pendleton County, and thought I might die. let's see, there is the essay about crawdads, hunting them with my kids. I'm scared of getting pinched, which is shameful, but I am. And so they thought I was an enormous weenie. There's a lot of animals. So there is the bat essay. As West Virginians, most of us have had a bat in our house, and I don't know that everybody in other states has that, but we certainly do, and it's pretty reliable every summer. And then there's a chapter about how everybody wants to tell the story of how they saw a copperhead. And it's always a copperhead, and it's almost never a copperhead. But the story's no fun unless it's a copperhead. So there's often a fierce debate between people about whether what they saw was a copperhead or a boring rat snake or something. And so the essay, I'm not even a snake lover, but it is in defense of copperheads. So, and then there's one about country roads. I don't think any West Virginia book would be complete without an essay about country roads and how it just kind of freezes us in our tracks wherever we are in the world. But also, that's just about the most popular song ever written across the globe. It's been translated into dozens of languages. They sing it in Asia. My friend Christina heard it in a bar in England. I've heard it on cruise ships. I've heard it in South America. So that's also one of my favorites. It's just one more thing that unites us. We just kind of get hypnotized and start swaying.
Ironically, it's not even really about West Virginia.
That's a good chunk of the essay, is how here in West Virginia we're so enamored with that song that we kind of look the other way on that, and it irritates us when people bring it up from out of state.
Indeed.
Yeah.
That's a whole conversation you don't want to have in a bar.
It is. We're a little sensitive about it.
So I think sometimes we have young viewers. So what advice would you give a young writer that wants to write nonfiction?
Well, I would say it's important to look at the world around you. It's important to look at the people around you. And it's important to tell your own story. And it doesn't matter what that looks like. Especially when you're young, the most important thing is that you just keep writing, even if it's just in a journal. And as you go, you can go back and look at the things you've written. And sometimes they become fodder for a story or an essay, any kind of narrative. And it sounds kind of boring, but keep writing. Just keep writing. Don't stop, and you'll be able to watch your writing evolve over time. And also never underestimate the importance of visiting the library, because that's your best resource in the whole world.
So who do you read?
Who do I read? Oh gosh, well, I enjoy Barbara Kingsolver. I enjoy all the classic naturalists, but I try to follow people who do environmental humor, and there are not a ton of them. But Mike Branch is a writer out west who writes environmental humor about the desert, and John Price writes about the prairies. Actually, I mean, you don't hear a lot of anything about the prairies, but he writes beautifully about the prairies. I love Mary Oliver, and then I went to Chatham University in Pittsburgh, and there are some just phenomenal writers who teach at Chatham. Lori Jaquila is one, Sheila Squilante. I've taken a class with Dinty Moore. He's phenomenal. So there's just, there are so many amazing writers out there, but there are so many around you in your backyard, especially here in Appalachia. So Nima Avagia is right here from Cross Lanes.
Yeah.
And her book is phenomenal. I always recommend that people read other West Virginia perspectives besides mine, because there are an awful lot of diverse voices out there that deserve attention.
Well, I think it's interesting. You're a humorist environmental writer. That's like a niche that's about that big.
It is.
I think we can safely say you're going to rise to the top of that cup when your book comes out, because it's just wonderful.
No, thank you.
Go
We can
buy
hope.
her book.
We can hope.
Yes. So when it's published, where will it be available? Just online, or?
It'll be available online, and it is available for pre-order at Autumn House Press right now, and also on my website. And then I hope to see it in small bookstores across West Virginia, and there's no shortage of wonderful ones. I hope it will appear in state parks. I would imagine it will appear in Pittsburgh, and hopefully I'll be able to get it out into Greater Appalachia road trip.
Well, yeah, I know you have some plans to visit some places
I
and
do.
do some signings. And I have another one for you. Don't let me forget. So October is coming out? Okay.
Yes.
Not a specific date, just,
I don't have a specific date yet.
okay. So can we anticipate a release? Hoo-ha, party?
We will have one, yes. Yes, I
Great.
think we'll have to do that. And I don't know whether that'll be in my hometown of Wheeling, or maybe we'll just have to bebop around the state and have several excuses to get together with
Yeah.
wonderful West Virginia writers.
I mean, who said you only have one?
You only go around once, so you might as well have many.
Might as well launch everywhere.
That's right.
Good reason for writers to get together and readers.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So I usually ask writers this when they're on the show. So I'll ask you too. I don't want you to feel left out. If you're on a desert island someplace and you can only have 2 books, what books and why?
Oh man. Okay, one of my absolute favorite books is by an author named George Constance, and it's about West Virginia. It's called Hollows, Peepers, and Highlanders, I believe, and so it's a wonderful compilation. There's geology, there's biology, there's human history in there, and I've read that one over and over and over again. And I've actually never met him, and I've always meant to reach out to him and tell him how influential that book has been to me. And then the other book that I absolutely adore is Into Thin Air by Jon Krakauer. And Jon Krakauer is an environmental and adventure writer, and his story is the 1996 Mount Everest disaster. And I read that book when I was younger, and I'm not even a climber. I mean, I love mountains and I love being in the mountains, but I'm not a climber. But that narrative is so compelling that it inspired me to read every book ever written on Mount Everest. So that's, if you open up my book cabinet at home, you'll see an entire shelf devoted to Mount Everest. And so it's an example of a writer who can absolutely suck you in. And he tells the story with such phenomenal, I don't even know what the word is. You get sucked in. I'm incredibly sucked in, and I've read it a dozen times.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to thank you for being with us today and talking about your new book. I can't wait to get it in my hands. Congratulations on that.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Sure. And I wanted to say to our viewing audience that this is my last show with West Virginia author. Kat Pleska will be coming back as your host, but I've had a wonderful 3+ years of talking to authors. Thanks.